Hello, everyone, and welcome to this second episode about money growth. So, in this episode, I will attempt to cover the euro dollar market, which is the more shadowy cousin of M2. I covered M2 in a prior video. One important thing to say is that M2 is within the US financial system. That's the number of dollars that are out there within the US financial system. But there is another system out there called the euro dollar market or the offshore dollar market. And as this article from Lykion says, the offshore dollar market is something of a mystery. We don't know much about it. It's a very shadowy system, but it has a quite large influence on today's financial system because much of the money um, that is printed by the Fed and goes abroad, goes to the euro-dollar market, may find its way back to the US and actually inflates asset prices in the US and inflate prices such as stocks, real estate, etc. So really, when we look at the money stock, we have to look at the global stock of US dollars and not just M2, not just the stock of US dollars within the US financial system, because all US dollars are bidding up assets, not just the US dollars included within M2. And so there's no statistics published on the euro dollar market, but there's some evidence that suggests that it is actually bigger than M2, bigger than the US financial system, because most companies actually transact in dollars, even though they are not located in the United States, since the dollar is the world reserve currency. So let me walk you through really quickly about what the euro dollar is. So worldwide money supply is M2 plus euro dollar. And M2 does not include euro dollars. M2 is beyond euro dollars. And this is some of the research that I'd like to highlight. Well, first of all, US dollars held outside of the United States are called euro dollar, right? That has nothing to do with Europe. But there's a problem with euro dollars is because they may be substitutes for deposit in American banks, in substitute bank. And so that's what they call the euro dollar conundrum. The euro dollar market can complicate Federal Reserve monetary policy because we don't know how many dollars are abroad. And it's a problem, and really don't know how fast it's growing. And so in this video, I'm going to try to attempt to estimate how many dollars are euro dollars abroad and how fast they're growing. Another issue is euro dollars and the U.S. money supply. Um, it's been purported to contribute to worldwide monetary inflation. And there's been in the past, but this is closer to a fact that these dollars that are held abroad come back to the U.S. banking system, right? When an American company sells something to a company in the rest of the world, that company has to pay in dollar, and therefore that company uses euro dollars to pay, right? So those dollars that are printed for the world, for the global market, make their way back to the US, and they make their way back to asset prices. So that's why it's a major flaw, I believe, that we don't include the euro dollar in our monetary inflation expectations. So I did a little digging as to what the size of a euro dollar could be. And so looking at research, it's really tough to find an estimate, but this paper, Altair 1967, claims that in 1967 there were about 10 billion euro dollars. And another paper, September 2016, from Einig and Daya, September 2016, claims that there are $13.8 trillion. This latter paper was published by bankers in New Zealand. And so we have two dates and two amounts. So we can calculate the growth, how much it has grown, right? And so when you do the cumulated average growth rate, right, compounded growth rate, we get to a 15.7% growth each year. That's what it has grown between 1967 and 2016. So the monetary printing in the euro-dollar world has been tremendous. So let's remove a 0.7 trillion. Let's just assume a 15% growth rate, today there would be something close to 32 trillion euro dollars. And this is even bigger than M2, because M2 is 21.7 trillion. So these euro dollars are growing really, really fast. So how does this compare to M2? Well, as I calculated in the former video, in the last episode of this series, 7% is what we've seen in M2 for the past 60 years until February 2020. And after February 2020, the expansion of the money stock, M2 money stock, went through the roof. Much higher than 15-16%. And then it's slowing down right now as the Fed is increasing interest rates. But in my estimate in the prior video, I think because of a deficit that there's going to be in the US government, I think it's very likely that M2 growth is going to be between 15 and 16%. So we can say that M2 was not growing as fast as the euro dollar market, but now M2 is growing as fast as the euro dollar market with 15 and 16%, and the euro dollar market was growing at 15% a year. So how did the euro dollar market get this big? Right? How can there be so many dollars outside of the United States? And so when you do a little digging into this obscure, more shadowy part of the system that the Eurodollar system is, you find that central banks of major countries like Japan, places in Europe, the UK, Switzerland, they often need dollars for their commercial clients. And so what they'll do is they'll do currency swaps where they give some of their own fiat money, right? Some of their own euros or their own Japanese yen. They give it to the central bank here in the United States, to the Fed, and the Fed in exchange gives dollars at a 1-to-1 ratio. So this is an example of current operations here. If you can see, we can see that recently, for example, the Swiss National Bank got $6.27 billion, right, in a swap, right, against Swiss money. Same here, right, again, the Swiss franc and $3.1 billion were swapped. And so if you go on the New York Fed website and look at all the swaps, you see that these happen all the time. So printed money from other central banks are given to the Fed, for which in exchange the Fed will print US dollars. And so you can see that it's a system that's really endless, that can really, really grow much faster than M2 monetary growth, because we can assume that the dollar is the strongest currency and that other central banks print much faster than the United States. The best example is Japan. Japan prints so much more than the US, and they do currency swaps. Another thing that Fed does is international repos, which is when a country, typically in a developing market, owns bonds, they can give those bonds to the Fed, and the Fed will issue dollars against those bonds. So these are just some of the mechanisms as to why the US dollar stock outside of the US financial system grows so fast. And it makes sense that it would be bigger, because most of the trade happens internationally and most business is conducted in US dollars around the world. It makes sense that it would be bigger, and it also makes sense that it will grow faster, because when these swaps are used to access dollars, I can only assume that other central banks print much faster. So with all of the data at hand, I did a little calculation as to what we can expect within the US dollar stock, the total global stock of US dollars, which is what we care about, because asset prices are being bid up by both the US financial system, dollars in the US financial system, and euro dollars, i.e. foreign dollars outside of the US financial system. They both bid on assets. That's why we care. So it was 11.79% per year if you combine both up until 2020, 11.79%. So let's call it 12%. So we can see that until 2020, the euro dollar was really having a inflationary influence on the M2. But since now I estimate that M2 is going to grow just as the euro dollar market, we are in for a solid 15% a year monetary growth going forward, which means that the money supply would essentially go from 50 trillion today at the end of 2022 to 100 trillion in late 2026, early 2027, as 15% a year for 5 years would be a doubling. So we are in for major printing, which is why the money is getting devalued so fast. And it is so important for you to keep your share in your investments. If you own 0.0000001% of the total dollars out there, you want to keep that percentage the same, right? Because as they print, your percentage of the share of US dollars is getting diluted. That's why in this channel, I focus on all of the stocks, all of the investments that you can make that will help you keep up with 15% a year. 15% a year is really the new hurdle rate for most investments, I believe. And that's the whole point of this channel. You want to beat the denominator. You want to grow your assets, grow your wealth faster than this denominator in order to stay afloat. So this concludes this second episode in the series on money stock. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to go see my other video on M2 if you're interested. I'll post a link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.